All right. So, folks, this is another installment of my exploration of the tetrahedron. So, as you folks might remember, the tetrahedron. Let me start by this. So, first, the tetrahedron. All of this started with the tetrahedrons first, and now I have moved to octahedron because I'm able to think about the fourfold thinking, the fourfoldness much better. I'm just going to mute everybody so the sound is better. So I'm able to think of the fourfold vision much better with octahedrons. So I moved to octahedrons. So first point, so today is going to be, I am not really good at geometry. Okay, I'm just trying to learn about geometry. But I'm going to make some points about geometry. So today is going to be about the geometry, some geometrical observations about the octahedron. So there are three ways of looking at these solids. One is this way. You see, there are all these colors. So your attention naturally focuses on the faces. Okay, the faces. So, and they actually derive their name from the number of faces. So this is octahedron. It has 8 faces. But there is a more fundamental way of looking at it, and that is in terms of vertices. This is the same thing as this, except that this model focuses on the vertices here. So there are 6 vertices. So you can look at it like this. These are the 4 vertices, one here, like that. Okay. But there is a third way of looking at it where you're focused on the sides of it. So there are 12 different sides. So our friend octahedron, which I will call octa, for familiarity, it is now I feel that it's okay to call it just octa. Don't think it'll mind too much. So you can deal with it like this, you can deal with it like this, and you can deal with it like this. And each of them allows you to focus. So I started by using these 3 models. Then I found that the most deepest insights, and I'm using these as simply models to think about the fourfold vision, which is something that I've been working on for a long time. It is in the form of Carl Jung's functions. It is in form of Bhagavad Gita. It is in form of the Tao. It is in the form of philosophical functions of virtues. It is in the form of Gospel of John. I've been dealing with that. So, but essentially, I'm focused on the fourfold vision. And I found this model to be the most useful because it focuses on the edges here. So now I moved from this model, which is exactly the same shape as this model, but this uses colors. Okay. Now there are 4 colors, there are 12 sides. So they move in 3 ways. So the way in which this model works is that you can look at it as a frame here. See, let me point it exactly. This is a rectangular frame here, like this, all 4 different colors. This side starts with you having all 4 colors, and it flows, like, for example, look at this red, it flows out here, then it flows along the frame, and then flows towards the other person, something like that. So it is a flow. It's this 3-part flow, and you can look at it this way. See, this is a 3-part flow of red, and I can rotate it, and now it is green, and now it is blue, and now it is purple. So you have got this fourfold symmetry built into this. Okay. So this is where I was on Saturday morning. Okay. And then I decided to visit a friend of mine who is a mathematician, because I knew that he would come up with something interesting. So I visited him, and so first thing he says, "Oh, that's really interesting." Now, firstly, he is a real mathematician. Okay, so for example, for him, like octahedron is like child's play. So he works with mostly icosahedrons and how they map into dodecahedrons. And he says, okay, if I wanted to pack a whole bunch of dodecahedrons and icosahedrons together, how does it work? And what are the various symmetries? And how does it work in multiple dimensions and stuff like that? Okay, so for him, this is like very simple. But, you know, and this is a very unusual problem, because normally a mathematician would work at symmetries of something like this, where they wouldn't focus on the fourfold vision, fourfold things. They would look at all the symmetries that are possible here. Okay. But, you know, he was intrigued by this problem that, okay, I'm saying, look, I am interested in taking an octahedron, putting this four colors in there, and then looking at the symmetries. So the first question he asked me is that, I wonder how many possible symmetries can be there when you make an octahedron with 4 colors. Okay, so it so happened that I had actually done another one like this. Okay, already I had disassembled that because I like this flow from one place to another. But look at this one. Okay, this one, there are 3 vertices, 3 colors going out from each point. So you can go over here. There are 3 going out from here. There are 3 going out from here. And there are 3 going out from here. Okay, so that's the second one that I already knew. But then we asked the question, is there any other symmetry you can make with 4 colors? And there is. And that is, you can make a triangle, all red, purple, green, or blue. All right. And then we say, are there any other possibilities? And then we spend some time to prove that, okay, there are no other possibilities, that any variation you do while keeping, see, this is very easy to see. There are no other ways of doing the triangles. But the hardest thing for me was this, to prove that there can't be any other way of doing a symmetry with this kind of a flow. And it is possible to prove that. So then we finally decided, okay, so there are these 3 different ways of doing symmetry. So then I was saying, okay, what do these mean actually? Right? What do these mean? And then what I realized is that it was actually the first thing that I started out with. You can look at an octahedron like this, which focuses on the vertices. Now, if you look at this model, right, it is focusing on the vertices. It focuses all your attention on this vertex, which is a red vertex from which 3 red things are going through. Similarly, this one has 3 vertices going through. So this model really allows you to focus on the vertices. And now this one, you can see that it is really allows you to focus on the faces very easily. Okay, and this one allows you to focus on the edges. So now I have these 3 different models, okay, with which I can focus either on the edges or the faces or the sides. Okay, now I'm very excited about this. Now the question is why? Okay, so we'll come to that. Okay, that I found out when I met with another friend who really understands the fourfold vision as well. And then we were looking at how we can use the same idea using this model versus this model versus this model. Okay, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. That we can do another time. But, you know, we didn't stop there on mathematics, okay? The second thing I said, look, I like pen and paper, okay? And I want to be able to take one of these models and be able to convert it on pen and paper, not just as a drawing. You know, I know that you can draw like a three-dimensional looking thing on a paper, okay? But that's not the purpose. That's not my purpose. I want to be able to represent all the relationships here effectively on a two-dimensional shape. And the concept there is that of transformation, mathematical transformation. So there are equivalents of it. So it has to capture the 6 vertices, the 12 sides, and the 8 faces effectively. And during the transformations, things can change. You know, it might look very different, but it captures all the essential approach, essential things clearly. So we went ahead and came up with these 3. I don't know whether you can see it. Let me get some light on this, like this. Okay. Can you see this? So for example, this one right here. Okay. Let's see if I can. Let me just go ahead and admit. Oh, sure. Okay. So you can see this one right here is the one that focuses on the vertex. So it is tetrahedron looked at like this. Okay, so what you're doing is that you're taking a tetrahedron, looking at it like this, and then opening up these sides, you see, these triangles out like that. And this point here is at infinity over here. So that the circle that you see here is the point that was behind. And you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is the 5th vertex, which is at infinity, which is behind. You can see the number of sides is 12. And these are the number of faces. You see, it looks very different, but mathematically, it is equivalent. Okay. The same thing you can do with faces. This is far more easier to see here. This is when you're looking at this like this. And then what you do is you bring out these 3 triangles like this, and the remaining triangles you put at the face as at being infinity. So that is a way of doing this in 2D. But there is a third way where you're looking at the tetrahedron like this with edge in the front. Okay, like this. I think this is how we did it, like this. And then you open up these triangles to put it down on the 2D. So this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is another kind of transformation. Now, I was very excited about it because this allows me to not have to carry all of these around. Actually, like with my second friend, I tried to get away with just carrying this one and talking to him about it. But then he asked me a very interesting question about Jung's functions. You say, okay, in Jung's function, there is this opposite tension between like thinking and feeling, and between intuition and sensing. How does this model capture it? I said, wait a minute, I have to run home and get my other 2 models, because this one actually does a much better job. You can have, like, see, this is red is thinking and blue is feeling, and you can see that they are at the opposite end, and you can see how they dance with each other through that. So this one is in some context much better at talking about Jung's functions than this one. Okay, and then we try to map out in what context Jung's functions can be talked about better using the faces here, better using the sides here, and better using the vertices here. Okay, similarly for all other things that we were looking at. But the point about this is that you are doing 2 things. These are models. These are not This is not psychological functions. This is not Gospel of John. This is not Bhagavad Gita. What we're trying to do with models is that you're always trying to go back and forth between the model and reality. And you're trying to understand reality better by use of the model. And you use the model which is most effective at capturing all the relationships that you see. Okay, so but that is a separate meetup. I don't want to go through that. I just want to focus on the geometry here, the possibility of focusing on either the vertex or the face or the side with the same function just by a different arrangement of it. I'm very excited about that, and I think a lot of interesting things will come out from that. Now, again, this friend of mine is a mathematician. So he says, did you know that cube is a dual of octahedron, just like icosahedron is a dual of the dodecahedron? So I said, what? What is a dual? And how does that work? Because I had taken this with me when I visited him, our friend, the cube. And, my whole purpose of bringing the cube was to just show off all of this stuff that it can do. It can become a hexagon. It can fold up into 3 triangles like this. And then it can fold up nicely and become our friend, the tetrahedron. Okay. So I wanted to just show him this. But he says, no, you don't get it. Did you know that this thing here and this one here are duals? So I said, what exactly is a dual? Dual is when you take 2 platonic solids. This applies to octahedron and cube, or it also applies to icosahedron or dodecahedron. Okay, the tetrahedron is its own dual. Okay, so what is a dual? Dual is when you take vertices of a polyhedron and convert it, map it into faces. Okay, so for example, you will notice, let's just do the count. There are 12 sides that a cube has, and there are 12 sides that an octahedron has. Okay, now this is going to be a little bit complicated, so give me a little bit of time here. You can fit an octahedron inside. Okay, it has to have the right kind of matching in this case, but you see, let me just turn it properly here. Give me a second. There. Okay. So you can put one of these octahedrons inside a cube in such a way that the sides of the cube are perpendicular to the sides of the octahedron, and they all match up. So all the vertices of the cube correspond to the faces of the octahedron. So it is like taking this and transforming it into this. Okay, it's a very interesting transformation. So we did that. Now I have built this for this one, for this particular, you can see that this cube that I have has this flowing pattern of the blue. You can see the blue going like this, like this, like this. So this is designed to be the dual of this octahedron. And you can line it up. It's a little bit tricky to do it with just 2 hands, but if 2 people are doing it, it's a piece of cake. It just hangs, basically this cube just hangs on this. Okay, I have to adjust the shapes of it so that it becomes easy for me to do that. But that's what it is. Okay, so this concept of dual is a very deep concept. And again, I don't know. I'm just beginning to explore it, of saying, okay, how can these transformations be used? Because, we are surrounded by cubes, but if we can just transform every cube that we see into an octahedron back and forth anytime we want to, maybe there is something interesting there. So we went ahead and looked at it did the same thing for the cube. This is the 2D version of the cube. You can see this is the most easiest one to see, where it is focused on the face. Okay, this is the one that is focused on the vertex, and this is the one that is focused on the side. Now, if you want to see the mapping, you can take one of these things, which is very easy to see. This is the most familiar way, which you can look at the cube. And this corresponds to this one right here, the octahedron, which is focused on the vertex. So imagine this one. So what we did is that we drew this on this, where you have all the sides basically intersecting like that. Okay, so you can see the mapping between the vertices and the faces. And in case of the sides, it's a little bit, I'm more interested in the sides. So I built the corresponding, the dual cube with that. I also like the fact that you can just back it up like this and carry it. Of course, I love this one because it remains like that. This one I have to kind of struggle with in order to get it to where I want to make it look exactly the way. Otherwise, it can be just like this. So anyway, what I'm saying here is following things. One is the symmetry. There are three kinds of symmetry which can be captured in these models by themselves of the octahedron, which can lead to lots of interesting things, which I'm not talking about right now. And I've not even figured out most of them, okay? But I can see the tremendous amount of potential because it allows you to change the perspective. See, all of it is changing of perspective. You see, when you're focused on the vertices, you're focused on entities. When you're focused on the edges, you're focused on the connections between entities. And when you're focused on the face, you're focused on kind of stable arrangements, and you can use it to look at what is missing. Just as an aside, when you take this one, where there is a focus on the faces, if you kind of squish these things, it can become a tetrahedron. Okay, so you can imagine a tetrahedron. Let me see if I can find one. Okay, so look at this. This is the tetrahedron, right? Deliberately, I'm not using one with colors in it, so it's easier to see. You can put the tetrahedron in here, okay, like this. And you can see, and I can hold it up like this, and you can see it poking from all the faces. Okay, you can so there is a mapping that you can do. You can turn it in a way where those 8 things can become into these four things. So, and I mean, all of this is just the beginning, I think. I mean, I want to see the different applications of it that I can play with, but my aim is to go to icosahedron, because that's where kind of most of the really fascinating mathematical things are. And this is a subset of the icosahedron, and this is a subset of this. So you can move between these things. And there is all kinds of relationships that you can think about. the way in which I'm using these things is that these are models for me to make me think about relationships between the different functions. So today was just pure geometry, but I'm very excited about it because you have to, it's like as we're discovering Bucky's work, and I'm approaching it in my own way. So this is very different. Bucky doesn't use colors like this. I'm kind of taking it because the idea here is Bucky inspired comprehensivity. You take the base that you have and see what you can do with it. So what did you guys think? Was this what do you think of this? Any thoughts? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. Would love to hear your comments. You can ask questions if you want as well, but let's start with Paul, followed by Joe. Paul, what do you think?
Thank you, Srikant. I think you helped me overcome a trauma that's been with me for 30 years. Meaning, I think you were in the meetup where I talked about my crystallography class that was my
Yes.
90th class. But I see from this, it wasn't the subject, it wasn't my inherent lack of a certain kind of spatial intelligence. It was the damn teacher.
Yes, teachers are the worst.
Because he just it was sort of like a engineering exclusion class or something, and he destroyed it. And it's so interesting. And I followed what you said, and at least maybe I can pull back some of it. Because when you get a test on all those mapping and symmetries, I just went into an anxious paroxysm and the math. But if he had given it to me slowly at a high level with the miracle of it, I would have loved it. So thank you. You just corrected all that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
I mean, it's a lot of fun. I mean, the way you put it was just it really communicated it well. And I specifically the way focusing on entities, edges, and connections, and then how transformations actually happen between after that. That is a very powerful concepts. When people talk about entity level extraction, like all these concepts in computing, that's essentially you can relate the two. So it and really focusing on edges as well between entities is those are very important concepts. So I mean, and you can kind of see where the math fits in with the forms. And so no, I mean, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. So this is a lot of fun, and you're making it much more accessible by doing these exercises and these videos. These 20-minute videos are very, very helpful in because what happens is with this, you have to keep repeating it, and then you start to see, you get visions into what is exactly being relayed to you, and then how it relates to nature and how it relates to the real world, because ultimately you start to see those, that you're able, once you hear it enough, you can see those connections. So it's exciting stuff. It really, really is exciting stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. I'm beginning to read Synergetics. I'm using Amy Edmondson's book, Fuller Explanation. It's far more accessible than anything else that I've seen. And what the approach that Bucky has is truly profound, where you're, instead of starting with something which is abstract, like points and lines and planes, which are just made up, he starts with things which are real, like spherical things, and how, trying to fit them all together, and what kind of shapes result as a result of this packing, and building up things like the connecting lines between things as a consequence. So it's like it's building up mathematics from reality. It is truly profound, and I think we're just getting started here. So I am really anticipating how far we can go and in what directions we can go. Thank you. Let's go with Maritza, followed by Paul. Maritza.
I love the show and tell of it all. The just the hands-on 3D visuals, or 4D as it were, it's fascinating. It makes it very, very simple in a way that I think I love what Paul said, the idea that there is so often people kind of shy away from geometry because they think it's complicated. I mean, and I suppose technically it can be, but there's this beautiful simplicity to it also. Like, what you're saying, you were talking about duals and duality. The neat thing is that, every self dual has a dual. Like, so it's like, and it's just to say that doesn't make any sense until you take and you bring it up and you say, for every tetrahedron, you can fit another tetrahedron. And that's what a dual means. So, and it's so simple when you can see it come to life, as opposed to, I do think the verbiage to geometry can sometimes be daunting to the average person, because not everyone goes ahead and puts things. I have a question. When you're talking points, is it fair to say that the points are the symmetries? So like if I were thinking icosahedron.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Somebody correct me if I'm right, if I'm wrong. I think it's 60 symmetries. Oh, it's been forever. I think it's 60 symmetries. Would that be, that's the corresponding number of points, right?
No, by points here,
No.
I use the terms like vertex,
Mm-hmm.
Which is like things that are things that are being connected by lines. So like in this case, there are 6 vertices. So these are six balls, and then you have lines connecting them. So this one, when you connect the lines between this and this point, you get these lines, and then these lines together form the faces. So I'm in terms of symmetries, it's like all of these shapes have certain number of symmetries. So for example, let's take the tetrahedron, right, which is the simplest.
12, right?
It has it has basically 7 symmetries. Okay, it's
Not
very
12?
difficult.
Are you sure it's not 12?
So I mean, this is like mathematical. So you can look at it in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 faces, and that includes the face and this point.
Mm-hmm.
But there is another symmetry where there are 3 symmetries that have to do with edges. So there is an edge here, okay, and there is an edge which is perpendicular to it, like this here. So that pair, there are 3 such pairs. So that is 3 more symmetries like that.
Mm-hmm.
And for each of these objects, there are multiple symmetries. And I still don't have a very good grasp of all the symmetries to be able to kind of go through and what these things mean, and how you can use it. The other thing that I find is that there are 2 parts of it. One part of it is what I really learned from Strupy. The Strupy's presentations of actually taking these things and working with them and making things yourself and all of this, right? And it's actually not that difficult. It's actually very, very simple. But I had not even thought of doing, making these things, and what the process of making these things actually teaches you a lot of things about how these things are put together. But that's just one approach to it. The other approach to it is these symmetries are very real. So it is like you have to have a very, what Strupi brings is a deep connection to the physical things. You also need like the mathematical ability. So to be able to go between like face symmetry of the face, thinking in terms of the vertices, thinking in terms of edges, and being able to shift between them.
So that's funny, Shrikant. You just said that, and I just realized I don't know if it's a problem. My default is to look at the you're calling them vertices, so the points, and for me in my mind I'm looking at the tetrahedron going, well, the points, there's 3 to each one, there's 3 convergences, so that means there's 12 symmetries, and that's where my mind goes, and I was like, what does he mean that there's 7? It's funny because again I have to shift in perspectives. I have to look at it from, you're looking at it from the flat as opposed to the point, and if I can shift that way, then I can see where you're coming at. It's funny, you don't even realize the ways in which we see something in one light, and what the value could be of looking at it from others. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So it's like, using CJ's terminology, there are these 4 on-ramps, okay, to synergetics and to thinking about this. So one of them is the physicality of actually designing these things, actually building these things. That is the design part, the physicality. The second part is the geometry part. That's where the saying, okay, how many symmetries does this one have, and how many symmetries does this one have? What is the idea of dual? How do you map this from 3D to 2D? Now that's all just pure mathematics, and that is extremely valuable. And the way in which Bucky puts it together is that he actually builds these mathematics off the concrete things. So those are the 2. But in addition to that, there is the part of kind of collaboration, and there is the part of intuitions. What kind of intuitions can you get? I mean, all the work that we are doing on the Fourfold Vision falls into the in the category of integrities that CJ talked about. That you're trying to say, okay, how do you bring together the faculties, all the faculties that we have like this? We have these 4 faculties. How do you bring them together? And how do you interact with another person who has the same faculties? You are like this, they are also like that, but the emphasis is different, and you're acting with each other, interacting using this frame, the system, and that has fourfoldness too. So you have fourfoldness, the other person has fourfoldness, and the way you're interacting with the other person has fourfoldness. And how do you vary these things, and how do they come together, and how do they interact with one another? That's the integrity angle. And this entire project, the fact that we can have somebody who's focused, who's very good at making things, then somebody like Tom, who's very good at kind of taking apart and putting together icosahedrons and seeing what fits into what, then we're going to have Kirby, who's going to be talking about geometry at a grand level. Then we're going to have somebody like Harold, who is really, really good at design, and somebody like Yasuhiko, who talks about the same thing, but from the integrity perspective. And all of them are talking to each other, listening to each other, and rising up in their own ability, own intuitions. And we are all doing the same, using whatever abilities that we have and whatever paths that we find most productive. So that's what is the beauty of all of this. Thank you, Maritza. Paul, what's your question? You had a question.
Yeah, I moved it to a question mark.
Yes.
But a quick comment on the what Maritza said and what you said is, as you go through this, I see you've got this skill of doing what, like, in contrast to my one professor, my physics professor did, like when describing E equals MC squared, you can do it at a level that brings the miracle out without requiring the math that Einstein used to prove it. So I'm putting in the chat, because I remember like a test question, like prove that the octahedron and the cube are a duo. And here's an example of that math. It's hard math. And but you're trying to find a way to show it at a high level where you, as a comprehensivist, you decide or not to decide to understand that math. And I really respect that. But my question is, have you looked back at your old diagrams and had a little, wow, I had mapped a tetrahedron to a sphere with my circle with the 4 points and the internal points, and I came to the same place. I'm just wondering, I almost feel like in my memory, I see the diagrams you showed me. So that's my question.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'll answer both. I'll respond to both the things. I mean, it's really odd and it's really sad what happens to fields. Like if you look at, for example, let's take Einstein. Einstein has written a book on relativity, special and general, which is a very short book, but it is crystal clear. It does take effort for you to understand it, but it actually manages to communicate to you. Look at optics of Newton, okay, or Darwin's work. All of that has a nature of somebody authentically engaging with the world and explaining to the other people how they did that. And it has a quality which is very different from everything in science that I learned. Newton's laws are not taught like that. Newton's optics is not taught like that. Einstein is not taught like that. Darwin is not taught like that. But when you go back to the source, they have it. So in some ways, what the teachers are doing, unfortunately, and the Ruth Bernsteins were here, and they were saying that, our really arch enemies are science teachers, because what we find is that we are interested in how science is done. And that's what we think is worth teaching, because whereas science teachers think that you have to learn the products of science, and the way in which they are teaching actually stops you from being able to do science. You have the products, you have the forms. I mean, I'm using that word loosely, but because you don't really have it, because you are not able to apply it in a wide variety of contexts, only in exam questions which are isolated from everything else, where you can see things which have been you're given on a platter, you can do that. So I don't think it's even like useful. It is useful only within a very limited context. So I mean, that's the problem with teaching, and between not just teaching, it is a question, going back to Louis Sullivan, it is form and function. Everything is created by people who are focused on function and who develop the form that captures the function. And the forms that they create are living forms. Most people come to it, they appropriate the forms and then said, the forms are here, who needs the function? That is their approach. And then you have neither the forms nor the function. So great point. Now, in terms of, I think I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I have come this way and that way. And I keep circling back in some ways. It's mostly kind of spiraling. So it has many elements that I end up keep coming back to. Unfortunately, my memory is not very good. So I'm focused always forward. I'm saying, what's the best way of capturing it? In some ways, my memory is very good. It's there implicitly in me, whatever was there. But it's like, it is a kind of combination of having the most important thing that you had with you in some way, but at the same time, kind of openness to the new. And I'm finding that when I have these encounters like Bucky, for example, or my friend Octa here, you get new insights that that were not there. So I'm not really focused on trying to map back to what it was, because I think that will privilege the connections that I had made in the past. I know that they are there. I know that occasionally I look back, but but mostly as an entertainment, saying, this guy actually got this point, but there it was completely off. But so in that sense, I'm always kind of looking forward. But thank you very much. Really appreciate that. All right, folks, if anybody else has any kind of comments, let's do that. Otherwise, let's close up. So I am having such a great time doing these little presentations, because they work really well for me for a couple of reasons. One is that I continuously think about these things, and I want to tell my friends about it. So I want to come and tell you about it, because I've just, at the same time, I want to move forward. I think speaking it out enables me to go beyond this. This is, okay, I have done this. Now I've opened up the topic of, okay, how do you use these multiple models for thinking about one particular thing? So now I can move on to that question. All right, Margaret, you had a comment.
Thank you. And I'm not going to make sense. I'm just warning you all. Oh my goodness. I have a similar burning need to share in almost the same way that you share. It's really astonishing to me. An experience that started in my childhood. We lived, my family was involved in activities that took place at the St. Louis Basilica Cathedral. And it's covered with mosaics that are largely designed by Louis Tiffany. And I spent a lot of time there as a child while everybody else was, being theological. I was just, like a kid in a candy store looking at all this geometry, but it's all one-dimensional, but it's so full of color as well. And so there are 40 products in my mind that I so want to put on the market somehow, and I can't figure out how to do it. And I watch you, and I think there's no way to satisfy these, like, I wouldn't call it an obsession. I'm perfectly in control of it, but it's just such this core wish to share. And so much of it has to do with the process that I went through over years, trying to figure out, how did he do that? I would just sit in the cathedral and at first I would just sketch, and then I had to learn some geometry. I'm not naturally mathematical, but it's really basic, very basic compared to what you're talking about. But I could go on forever about this. I've just found so many books that are written by people who wanted to take this sort of stuff into the school system in the 1800s and 1900s, and they have this burning heart that you can read in their writing, and it's just so beautiful, and you can see how it falls in and out of fashion and history, and what sort of barbarians just make it useless, and we don't talk about design anymore. And so this is, I'm just trying to spit this out. It's such a tiny fraction of what goes on in my head all the time. It's just really amazing to meet all you guys and to listen to you in particular. Such a gift. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Margaret. Really appreciate it, because what happens is that each of us kind of communes with nature, communes with what is there, and we see things in our own way. I mean, one of the things I really love about our meetups here, we've been doing these meetups. I'm delighted that you found us, but we've been doing this is, I think, our 1,400th meetup, something like that.
Cool.
Because, and it's on very, very different topics, but a whole bunch of people come and they speak about what matters to them.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we put together, it's like different forums, we have some kind of themes so that there is a lot of people talking to each other. So like, Marisa does such a wonderful job with these poetry nights. And what we're doing with, for example, Buckminster Fuller, what, Harold Nelson is doing, Yasuhiko showed up this weekend. And so it's like, see, what happens is that this kind of conversation is profoundly life-giving, because
It is.
it just, and for me, I find that I learn much faster by doing this. Just firstly the
Wow.
the work of just the decision to say, okay, I want to say something, and just preparing your mind, say, okay, how am I going to communicate? There's just so many things that happen. How do I communicate? In what order? That itself kind of increases the clarity of my own thinking. Second thing is that, it's an amazing group of people here. So people will give you feedback
Wow.
of all kinds and at all levels that you do not even imagine. And they will ask you really interesting questions. So, I'm just tremendously blessed to have this and to be doing this. I'm, the thing is, before this, I did this in person in New York. And this was, it's one of the largest meetups that we had. We had
Wow.
60 to 80 people showing up every Saturday and talking about things for about 6 to 8 hours.
Oh my
Presentation after
gosh.
presentation. And then what happened was, COVID hit. So we couldn't meet anymore in person, and I didn't want to lose the community. That's why I moved to Zoom. And something wonderful happened. I mean, many things. I mean, one is that I made this connection with, it was Joe, actually. It is Joe's fault. So Joe showed up, and then he said, look, I have to introduce you to this guy, CJ. And then we kind of started working together with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, which had a much longer history than us. And a whole bunch of people from that, like Maritza, like Evanique, like lots and lots of other people like Allison and CJ, of course, kind of came together, and we would start collaborating. So it keeps on kind of both the attendees and the presenters. And there is no hard and fast line between attendees and presenters, because firstly, the format that we have allows people to speak their mind. So people can speak for 2 minutes, 5 minutes about things. And moment any of us see any of the organizers that, oh, they might have more things to say, we always invite people to present. And we do all kinds of things, like we're doing something called lightning talks. Like, many of us are trying to learn Buckminster Fuller, but we are learning. We know that we are learning. So we are not comfortable doing a presentation for let's say 45 minutes. But these lightning talks are like bite size. It's like 5 minutes. 5 minutes, many people can talk. And actually, people talking does wonders, because it is not TV. You see, TV, there is something really wrong with TV. It actually says that you are a passive being who is just going to absorb things. We are not like that. That's not human. This interaction is what makes us human. So this conversation, these conversations like this, build that up. So thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. It's like, because what happens is each person brings their own experience, own passions, like Tiffany, right? Tiffany in the cathedrals. Now, Tiffany is very special. And the way in which he managed to combine the shapes and the colors and what he made happen with those is truly spectacular. And what happens is that many of these achievements are deep. So you have to kind of take the time to commune with it. You have to actually draw it. You'll say, okay, what is this like? What is it making it work? How is it working actually? So thank you so much. And I'm delighted you're here. And please keep coming back. Really appreciate it. It's just thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. All right, folks. We will see you soon. We've got all kinds of meetups coming up. Joe, did you want to say something?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
No, perfect.
All right. Okay. All right, Maritza. So thank you so much. And thank you for giving me the chance to talk about my favorite octas. So, all right. Take care, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.